the goddess of Sunday. In a time long ago when gods and goddesses still walked among mortals and the boundary between the divine and human worlds was thinner than morning mist, there existed a beautiful custom observed throughout the land. Sunday was sacred, a day of rest and worship dedicated to the sun goddess who blessed the earth with light, warmth, and the abundance of growing things. On this holy day no work was to be done. No fields plowed, no bread baked, no clothes washed, no business conducted. Instead, people were meant to rest, to celebrate, to spend time with family, to worship at temples, to enjoy the beauty of creation, and to remember that life was about more than endless labor and productivity. The sun goddess herself had decreed this day of rest, understanding that humans needed time to restore their spirits, nurture their relationships, and connect with the divine and with each other in ways that constant work made impossible. In a small village at the edge of a great forest, there lived a hardworking woman named Marta who was known throughout the community for her incredible industriousness and her absolute inability to ever stop working. From the moment the sun rose until long after it set, Marta was constantly busy, baking bread, washing clothes, scrubbing floors, tending her garden, mending torn garments, preserving food, and completing 1,000 other tasks with relentless, driven energy that never seemed to diminish. Her house was always spotlessly clean, her garden always perfectly maintained, her clothes always freshly washed and carefully mended. Neighbors would marvel at how much she accomplished, how productive she was, how nothing in her household was ever left undone or neglected. But they also worried about her because Marta never rested, never relaxed, never allowed herself a moment of peace or joy that wasn't somehow tied to productive labor. Marta had a daughter named Sophia, a gentle girl of about 12 years old with curious eyes and a thoughtful nature who longed for her mother's attention and affection but received only distracted instructions about chores and work. Sophia would watch other families on Sundays gathering together for picnics and walks, playing games and telling stories, visiting temples to pray and sing hymns, laughing and enjoying each other's company with the freedom that came from setting aside the burden of constant labor. She would see fathers teaching their sons to fish, mothers braiding flowers into their daughters' hair, families sharing leisurely meals and easy conversation, and her heart would ache with longing for that same kind of connection with her own mother. But Marta insisted there was always too much work to be done, too many tasks that couldn't wait, too much that needed her attention to waste time on frivolous rest and celebration. "Mother," Sophia would say hopefully each Saturday evening, "tomorrow is Sunday, the sacred day of rest. Perhaps we could go to the temple together or take a walk in the forest or just sit in the garden and enjoy the sunshine. We could make flower crowns, or you could tell me stories about when you were young, or we could just be together without worrying about all the work for one single day." Her voice would be full of longing and hope, wanting desperately for her mother to choose relationship over responsibility, connection over productivity just once. But Marta would shake her head impatiently, her hands never stopping their constant motion as she scrubbed or kneaded or mended. "Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, they're all the same to me, Sophia. Work doesn't stop just because some ancient tradition says it should. There's bread to bake for the week ahead, clothes that need washing, the garden needs weeding, the floors need scrubbing, and 100 other tasks that won't complete themselves. Rest is for lazy people who don't understand the value of hard work and discipline. I'll rest when I'm dead, child. Until then, there's work to be done, and we'd best get to it rather than wasting time on idle wishes and foolish dreams." Sophia's heart would sink every time she heard these words, but she had learned not to argue. Instead, she would help her mother with the endless tasks, working through every Sunday while watching other children play and laugh outside, feeling the weight of her mother's obsession with work like chains around her young spirit. She understood, even at her tender age, that something was deeply wrong with a life that had no room for rest, for joy, for the simple pleasure of being rather than constantly doing. But she didn't know how to help her mother see what she was missing, didn't know how to break through the wall of compulsive productivity that separated them. One particular Sunday in late summer, when the air was golden with afternoon sunlight and the whole village was celebrating a harvest festival at the temple with music, dancing, food, and joyful worship, Marta was at home as usual, bent over her wash basin scrubbing clothes with fierce determination while Sophia watched sadly from the doorway. "Mother, please," Sophia begged one more time, tears gathering in her eyes. "Just this once, could we go to the festival? Everyone is there, celebrating the sun goddess's blessings and giving thanks for the harvest. I can hear the music from here and it sounds so beautiful. Couldn't we take just one afternoon to rest and celebrate like everyone else?" The clothes will still be here tomorrow. They're not going anywhere. Marta straightened up from her washing, her face flushed with exertion and her expression hard with stubborn determination. The sun goddess? She scoffed, her voice dripping with dismissive contempt. If she's so powerful and important, why doesn't she come here and tell me herself to stop working? I don't believe in wasting time on worship and celebration when there's real work to be done. Let others waste their Sundays on foolishness and fantasy. I choose productivity over superstition, hard work over lazy tradition. Now either help me with this washing or go find something useful to do instead of bothering me with your constant whining about rest and festivals. Sophia fled from the house in tears, running into the forest to escape her mother's harsh words and harsher life. And as she ran, she didn't notice that the sunny afternoon was suddenly growing darker, that clouds were gathering with unnatural speed, that the temperature was dropping despite the summer heat, and that an otherworldly presence was descending upon the village like a storm made of divine displeasure and righteous judgment. Back at the house, Marta returned to her washing, completely oblivious to the changing atmosphere, her hands plunging into the soapy water with mechanical efficiency as she scrubbed and wrung out garment after garment. She was so focused on her work, so absorbed in the mindless rhythm of labor, that she didn't notice when the water in her basin began to glow with golden light, didn't see when the wet clothes in her hands started to shimmer and transform, didn't realize that she was no longer alone in her yard until a voice spoke. A voice like sunshine given sound, warm but carrying an undertone of terrible power that made the very air vibrate with divine authority. So you do not believe in wasting time on the sun goddess? The voice said, and it held both amusement and anger, both curiosity and condemnation. You think worship and rest are foolishness and fantasy? You scoff at my sacred day and dismiss centuries of tradition as superstition? Very well, mortal woman. Since you value work so highly above all else, since you cannot conceive of a life that includes rest and celebration, since you mock my day and refuse my gift of Sabbath peace, let me give you exactly what you desire. An eternity of the work you love so much, with no possibility of rest, no chance of escape, no opportunity for the peace you so proudly reject. Marta looked up in shock and growing horror to see a woman standing in her yard who could only be the sun goddess herself, tall and radiant, with skin that glowed like dawn, hair that flowed like liquid gold, eyes that burned with the intensity of noon sun, wearing robes woven from light itself that shifted between shades of yellow, orange, and blinding white. The goddess was beautiful beyond any mortal beauty, but her expression was stern and disappointed, like a loving parent who has been patient for far too long with a stubborn, disobedient child who refuses to learn necessary lessons. Before Marta could speak, could apologize, could beg for mercy, the goddess raised her hand and divine power flowed from her fingertips like radiant water. The wet clothes Marta had been washing wrapped themselves around her body, adhering to her skin and beginning to transform. Marta felt her body changing, shrinking, her human form dissolving and reshaping into something entirely different. Her legs became a wooden handle, her torso flattened into bristles, her arms disappeared entirely, and within moments where a woman had stood, there was now nothing but a common scrub brush lying in the grass beside the wash basin, an ordinary household tool, useful only for endless, mindless cleaning, trapped in the very labor she had valued above all else. Sophia, returning from the forest with tear-stained cheeks, arrived just in time to witness the transformation. She cried out in horror and fell to her knees before the sun goddess, her young face pale with shock and grief. "Please, great goddess," she sobbed, her voice breaking with desperate pleading, "please don't do this to my mother. She was wrong, terribly wrong, but she doesn't deserve to be a scrub brush forever. Please, I'll do anything. I'll work every day, I'll never rest, I'll take her place in the punishment. Just please give her back her human form. She's all I have, and despite everything, I love her." The sun goddess looked down at the weeping child with an expression that softened slightly, compassion mixing with her justified anger. "Sweet child," she said gently, kneeling to Sophia's level and wiping away her tears with fingers that felt warm as summer sunshine, "your love for your mother despite her failures honors you, and your willingness to sacrifice for her shows a generous heart. But this punishment is not about cruelty. It is about teaching a lesson that your mother refused to learn through gentler means. For years, I have sent reminders through other people's joy, through your pleading, through the beauty of sacred days she refused to acknowledge. She rejected every gentle teaching, mocked my holy day, and valued productivity above relationships, work above worship, endless labor above the rest that makes us human rather than machines. She must learn what happens when we become nothing but our work, when we lose our humanity to constant productivity. Sophia looked at the scrub brush that had been her mother, her heart breaking with grief and fear, but the goddess had not finished speaking. However, the sun goddess continued, her voice taking on a tone of possibility and hope, this curse is not necessarily permanent. There is a way to break it, but it will require your mother to learn the lessons she has refused, to understand the value of rest, the importance of relationships, and the sacred nature of the day set aside for renewal and worship. Here is what must happen. Your mother, in her brush form, will be used by whoever finds her. She will experience what it means to be nothing but a tool, valued only for productivity, used endlessly without rest or appreciation. She will learn what she has made herself into, an object defined solely by work with no higher purpose or deeper meaning. The goddess picked up the scrub brush gently, examining it with eyes that saw both what it was and what it had been. The curse can only be broken if 3 conditions are met. First, someone must use this brush on a Sunday, violating the sacred day of rest just as your mother did, and must feel genuine remorse for that violation, recognizing the wrongness of endless work without Sabbath. Second, the brush must be blessed by someone who truly understands the balance between labor and rest, who works hard during the week but honors the sacred pause. And third, your mother's spirit within the brush must genuinely repent of her obsession, must understand what she lost by choosing work over relationship, must truly desire to change her ways. Only when all 3 conditions are met will she return to human form. The sun goddess placed the brush back in Sophia's hands, and the girl clutched it to her chest, feeling the faint warmth within the bristles that suggested her mother's spirit was still present, still aware, still capable of learning and changing. Take care of her, child, the goddess said with surprising gentleness. Love her, teach her through your example, and have faith that even the hardest hearts can soften when they finally understand what they've lost. And remember always to honor the sacred day of rest, not because of rules or fear, but because you deserve joy, because relationships matter, and because we are human beings, not human doings. Our worth comes from who we are, not just from what we accomplish. With those words, the sun goddess dissolved into golden light that rose into the sky like the sun itself, leaving Sophia alone in the yard clutching the scrub brush, tears streaming down her face but hope flickering in her heart like a candle flame that refuses to be extinguished. From that day forward, Sophia kept the brush with her always, talking to it as if her mother could hear, which she could, trapped in her wooden prison, telling it about her days, sharing her thoughts and feelings, demonstrating the love and connection her mother had been too busy to offer when she was human. Sophia made sure to honor every Sunday scrupulously, attending temple services, resting from work, spending time with neighbors and friends, living a life that balanced productive labor with sacred pause, demonstrating the very lessons her mother needed to learn. She would sit with the brush on Sunday afternoons and tell it about the services, about the music and the prayers, about the peace she felt when she stopped working and just existed in the moment, about the conversations and connections that enriched her life in ways that productivity never could. And sometimes she thought she felt the brush grow warmer in her hands, as if her mother's spirit was beginning to understand what she had missed, what she had sacrificed in her obsession with endless work. Months passed and Sophia grew from a child into a young woman, supporting herself through careful work during the week but always honoring Sunday as sacred. She kept her mother's brush carefully, never using it for actual cleaning, treating it with respect and love despite its humble form. She joined the temple community, learning from the priestesses about balance and wisdom, about the sacred rhythm of work and rest that sustains both body and soul. She fell in love with a kind young man named Thomas who was a carpenter, someone who worked hard with his hands during the week but who understood the importance of setting aside time for worship, for relationship, for the renewal of spirit that makes hard work sustainable rather than soul-destroying. When Sophia and Thomas married, it was on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in the temple, surrounded by community and celebration, with music and dancing and joyful worship of the sun goddess who blessed their union. Sophia brought her mother's brush to the ceremony, placing it in a position of honor, wishing her mother could witness this moment and understand what she had missed by rejecting rest and celebration for endless work. And as the ceremony concluded and the sun goddess's blessing was pronounced over the couple, Sophia could have sworn she felt the brush vibrate with emotion, as if the spirit within was finally beginning to understand what truly mattered in life. Sophia and Thomas built a good life together, working hard during the week but always honoring Sunday as a day of rest, worship, and connection. They had children, 3 beautiful daughters who learned from infancy the importance of balance, who grew up understanding that they were valued for who they were and not just for what they could produce, who knew their parents would always have time for them on the sacred day set aside for family and faith. Sophia told her daughters about their grandmother who had become a scrub brush, sharing the cautionary tale to teach them about the dangers of valuing work above relationships, productivity above rest, accomplishment above simply being. One Sunday afternoon many years later, when Sophia was a mature woman with teenage daughters and silver beginning to show in her dark hair, her youngest daughter Elena came running into the house with tears streaming down her face. "Mama," she cried, her voice breaking with distress. "I did something terrible. I was playing near the creek and I got my Sunday dress all muddy and I knew you'd be disappointed, so I took grandmother's brush and I used it to try to scrub out the stain. I know I shouldn't have worked on Sunday, I know the day is sacred, but I was scared and I wasn't thinking and I'm so sorry. I feel awful. It was wrong to violate the Sabbath, wrong to treat work as more important than the holy day, wrong to let fear and pride make me break the sacred rest." Elena's genuine remorse, her deep understanding of why working on Sunday was wrong and her sincere repentance for violating the sacred day, fulfilled the first condition. Sophia, rather than being angry, recognized this as the moment they had been waiting for. She gathered all her daughters together, and they took the brush to the temple, to the high priestess who had taught Sophia so much about balance and wisdom over the years. This priestess was a woman who embodied the perfect harmony between industrious labor and sacred rest, who worked tirelessly during the week serving the community but who guarded Sunday as fiercely as a mother guards her children, understanding that this day of pause was not laziness but necessary sustenance for the soul. The priestess took the brush in her weathered, work-worn hands that knew both labor and rest, both service and Sabbath, and she blessed it with prayers that called upon the sun goddess's mercy and grace. "This brush," she said solemnly, her eyes closed in deep prayer, "represents a soul who lost her way, who forgot that we are human beings created for relationship and worship, not just tools created for endless productivity. But she has learned through suffering what she refused to learn through gentle teaching. May she be restored, may she be given a second chance, may she use her remaining years to honor the sacred balance between work and rest, between doing and being, between productivity and peace." As the priestess's blessing concluded, the brush began to glow with the same golden light that had transformed Marta in the first place. But now the transformation was reversing. The wooden handle elongated and became legs. The bristles softened and became torso and arms, and finally, lying on the temple floor where the brush had been, was Marta herself. Older now, having experienced the passage of all those years even in her cursed form, but alive, human, and most importantly, changed in ways that went deeper than her physical form. Marta looked up at her daughter with eyes that held tears and wonder and profound regret. "Sophia," she whispered, her voice hoarse from years of silence, "my precious daughter, I have been such a fool. All those years trapped as a brush, being nothing but a tool, experiencing the emptiness of existence without relationship or rest or purpose beyond endless function. I finally understood what I had become, what I had chosen. I heard every word you spoke to me over the years, felt every moment of your love despite my failures, witnessed your beautiful life built on the very principles I rejected. I am so sorry, so deeply sorry for the years I wasted, for the love I rejected, for the sacred days I mocked. Can you ever forgive me?" Sophia fell to her knees beside her mother, embracing her with tears of joy streaming down her face. "Of course I forgive you, Mama," she sobbed. "I never stopped loving you, never stopped hoping you would return, never stopped believing you could learn and change. Welcome back, welcome home, welcome to a life that includes rest and celebration, relationship and worship, being and not just doing." Marta lived many more years after her restoration, and they were the richest, most meaningful years of her entire life. She became the most devoted observer of Sunday Sabbath in the entire village, attending every temple service with genuine joy and reverence, spending long hours with her daughter and granddaughters making up for lost time, learning to rest without guilt, to celebrate without feeling wasteful, to simply be present and alive without constantly working. She would often speak to groups at the temple, sharing her story as a cautionary tale and a testimony to the sun goddess's mercy, warning others about the dangers of allowing work to consume their humanity and teaching them about the sacred importance of rest. Work is good, she would tell them, her voice carrying the authority of hard-earned wisdom, but work without rest destroys us. Productivity matters, but relationships matter more. Accomplishment has value, but it cannot substitute for worship, for Sabbath, for the sacred pause that reminds us we are more than our output, more than our accomplishments, more than the sum of our tasks. The sun goddess in her wisdom gave us Sunday not as a burden or restriction, but as a gift. A day to remember who we are, to reconnect with those we love, to worship the divine, and to restore our souls so that our work during the week becomes sustainable rather than soul-destroying. Honor this gift. Embrace this sacred rest. Don't make the mistake I made, wasting decades trapped in endless work, missing the beauty and meaning and connection that make life worth living. The story of Marta and the scrub brush became legendary throughout the land, passed down through generations as both warning and hope. Warning that work without Sabbath rest destroys our humanity, and hope that even the hardest hearts can soften, even the most stubborn souls can learn, and even the worst mistakes can be redeemed when we finally open ourselves to the lessons we've been resisting. The sun goddess herself was said to smile whenever she heard the story told, pleased that her harsh lesson had borne such good fruit, that her sacred day was being honored more faithfully because people understood not just the rules but the reasons, not just the tradition but the deep wisdom behind it. And every Sunday, in temples and homes throughout the kingdom, people would pause from their work, would gather with loved ones, would worship and rest and simply be, remembering that they were created not as tools for endless productivity but as beloved beings deserving of peace, connection, and the sacred rhythm of labor and rest that sustains both body and soul. They would honor the goddess of Sunday not out of fear but out of gratitude, understanding that the day of rest was not a burden to endure but a blessing to embrace. A gift that separated humans from machines and made life not just productive but truly meaningful.